Hello students, in the previous session we have learned about the author's grandmother's appearance, right? We have learned that when the author's parents wanted to settle in the city first and therefore they left the author with his grandmother in the village. So after that the author and the grandmother lived like two very good friends. Okay, so now when my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. That was a turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. There were no dogs in the streets, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. So, when the author's parents got settled in the city, they called them, means they called the author as well as the grandmother. So the author and the grandmother had to go to the city now, and the author says that that was the turning point of his friendship with his grandmother. Both of them shared the same room, but she no longer would give him company to his school. She would not go to the school with him anymore. The author started going to an English medium school, and that too in a motor bus. The motor bus would come to pick and drop him. So there were also no dogs in the streets whom the grandmother could feed, as she used to feed the street dogs in the village. And that is why the grandmother started feeding sparrows in the veranda of their house. Now, as the years rolled by, we saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. She did not believe in the things that they taught at the English school, and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and the scriptures. One day, I announced that we were being given music lessons. She was very disturbed. To her, music had lewd associations. It was the monopoly of harlots and beggars and not meant for gentlefolk. She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. So students, as the years passed in the city, the interaction or that communication between the author and the grandmother reduced. Okay, sometimes the grandmother used to wake him up, and she used to get the author ready for school. She would ask him what he had learned in school that day, and the author used to tell her English words and he also used to tell his grandmother about science, gravity, Archimedes' principle, etc. So which these topics made the grandmother unhappy, because she did not know the language. As she did not know the language, she could not help him with the lessons. She never believed whatever was taught in the English school, and as the author's new school did not teach anything about God and religious scriptures, so this thing made the grandmother sad, because author's grandmother was a very religious kind of a person, and this fact that the author's English school did not teach anything about God and religious scriptures, this thing made her sad. And then again, one day when the grandmother came to know that the author was getting music lessons, it disturbed her. She was very much disturbed by this thing, because according to the grandmother, music was indecent, okay, and it was an art for the beggars and the prostitutes, and music was not for those people who belong to decent families. It is not for the gentlefolk. She believed that, the grandmother believed that. Okay, the grandmother had this idea, had this concept in her mind about music, regarding music. So the grandmother did not like that the author learned music, and that is why she stopped talking to him. Okay. Now, when I went up to university, I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. My grandmother accepted her seclusion with resignation. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon, she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda, breaking the bread into little bits, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirrupings. Some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders, some even sat on her head. She smiled, but never shooed them away. It used to be the happiest half hour of the day for her. So now the author talks about the time when he went to the university. Okay, so as the author went to the university, there he had his own room. The common link of his friendship with his grandmother was snapped, was finished. Means the common friendship and the link that they had when they shared the same room was changed now. That a common link of friendship between both the author and the grandmother was broken. Their friendship almost ended. Okay, the grandmother became more private after that. She did not talk much with other people and used to spend her time whole day spinning the wheel. From sunrise to sunset, from morning to evening, she would sit with her spinning wheel and recite the prayers. And only in the afternoon, there is a time when she used to feed the sparrows in the veranda. Okay, she used to feed hundreds of birds by breaking the breads into small pieces. The birds used to gather around her. Some sat near her, some on her legs, some sat on her shoulders, and a few birds even sat on her head. The grandmother always smiled, but she never shooed them away. Okay, and the author says that the grandmother was the happiest in that half an hour when she used to feed the sparrows. So that was the happiest moment, that was the happiest half an hour for the grandmother during the day, the half an hour in which she used to feed the sparrows in the veranda. Now, when I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age, one could never tell. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at the railway station, but did not talk or show any emotion. Her lips moved in prayer. Her mind was lost in prayer. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of her rosary. Silently, she kissed my forehead, and when I left, I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. So students, now the author was about to go abroad, outside the country, okay, for his further studies. So when the author decided to go abroad for his further studies, he thought and he believed that it would be the last time he would see his grandmother, as he was going away from her for 5 long years. And at her age, at the age of his grandmother, one could never tell. Means as the grandmother was very old and the author was going abroad for about 5 long years, she could have passed away, right? She might have passed away in these 5 years. So you never know. So as she was a very old lady, so but his grandmother could. Means his grandmother was confident that she would live till he returns, and she was not even sentimental, she was not even upset. Okay, so now as they all reached the station, the grandmother held the author tightly and kissed his forehead, and the author when the grandmother held the author tightly and kissed his forehead, at that time also the grandmother was completely lost in her prayers. She was reciting the prayers. The author could hear her reciting the prayer silently. So the author thought that that was the moment, that was the last moment, that was his last moment with his grandmother, and he thought that it was the last physical contact with his grandmother. Now, but that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. She did not look a day older. She still had no time for words, and while she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayers. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer and with frivolous rebukes. But now the author says that as he thought that the grandmother kissing his forehead would be their last physical contact, the author now says that no, that was not so. When he came back after 5 long years, the grandmother was still alive. The grandmother came to meet him at the station, and the author says that the grandmother looked just the way she did 5 years ago, and not a day older. Then the grandmother held him again in her arms, and she was still reciting her prayers. And moreover, the author says that he noticed on the first day of his arrival that the grandmother's happiest moment was when she sits to feed the sparrows in the afternoon. He noticed that only the sparrows made her happy. So students, we will stop here for now and we'll continue the further chapter in the next session.